Welcome, everyone. Kartik is an Android engineer at Bilue. He's a new Google developer expert, and he's just moved down from Sydney to Melbourne. So he's joined the organizer team here as well. His favorite ice cream is chocolate, and you're going to see why that's relevant later. His talk is going to be on unified insights, crafting an analytics solution in Jetpack Compose. Give it up for Kartik.
All right. Morning, everyone. It's good to be back here this year. I was here last year as well. Let's just jump into it. I'm going to be talking about analytics in Jetpack Compose. We've all dealt with Jetpack. We've all dealt with analytics. And it's going to be simple. It's going to be a very obvious solution to some of the problems that I'm going to discuss. And most likely, we've already implemented this. But this is all based off my experience with Jetpack and Jetpack Compose and analytics so far. Analytics are super important for individual developers, for enterprises. You can't live without it. They help you track user metrics, user behaviors, help businesses attain the KPIs they are after. So obviously, you can't really live without analytics. But at the same time, you can't live peacefully with it. It's hard to, implement different analytic providers and things like that. For enterprises, there are vendor lock-ins. You have to deal with their very, very sad SDK, no matter what. Probably written in Java in 2010, maybe 11, I don't know. You don't have a choice there. You have to deal with it. As an individual developer, you might not have the time and resources to, switch from one provider to another. So you have to deal with it. So yeah, all of these problems add to the complexity of analytics. We're engineers, we solve problems. So I'm going to talk about two problems that I face most often and how I try to solve them. But full disclaimer, the title was a little clickbaity. It's not all about Jetpack Compose. There is Jetpack Compose. We are solving using Jetpack Compose, but we're solving analytics first and wrapping Jetpack Compose around it. Okay, next up. The first problem is the provider lock-in. You're probably locked in with Adobe or Firebase or whatever your contract is, and you want to switch, but you can't because either enterprise agreements or you don't have the time, you've got too much going on, you don't have the resource to actually figure out licensing and whatnot. So the obvious solution here, next slide. Yeah, the obvious solution here is an abstraction layer. And by that, what I mean is, come on. Yeah, something like this, very simple. You have an interface. I've dumbed it down. Obviously, it's not as easy as it's shown here, but I've dumbed it down for the sake of the presentation. But at the end of the day, we care about tracking screens and tracking user actions with some data around it. So an abstraction like this, which can be exposed to your UI or your logic or wherever you're doing your analytics. And then you implement something like this. This example is Firebase, using that abstraction and just call the analytics provider relevant functions within the overridden functions. So now, if you want to change your provider, you just have to plug out Firebase or maybe have a new implementation from Adobe, but you don't have to deal with changing everything on the UI side. And this will take care of, passing on the correct values to the right provider. So half the problem is solved, that you don't have to now go and figure out where else you're calling that particular Firebase or Adobe SDK, switch that to the other one. Leave that be, leave that in your view model screens, wherever, and just modify this. Second problem was handling multiple providers. I've seen this in my experience in some of the other applications around. You have multiple providers. I don't get why. You're sending the same data to two providers because you're going to get two different outputs from it. I don't get it. But then if it is something your enterprise wants to do, sure. And then instead of calling each function individually, that duplicates a lot of code. You can use a composite pattern of sorts, again, using the same abstraction, but you can have three different implementations. And they're not going to call individual functions from these implementation. You're going to create another implementation, which is the composite. It takes a list of these providers or the list of this abstraction implementation and passes on the data individually to each one of them. So at the end, wherever you're calling your track screen and track view functions, it's still the same. You're not changing that. It's just that your provider itself or your exposed reference is changed, and that is taking care of passing it on. So far, easy, obvious solutions. Pretty sure most of you worked on analytics, have thought of it, have implemented it, which is great. Oh yeah, an example of how you would use that composite, and instead of exposing Adobe implementation or Firebase implementation, just expose your composite implementation. Now the Jetpack Compose part. So traditionally, we've been using view-based and event-based UI systems in Android, and that is slowly moving away. Most of us are now using Jetpack Compose, which does not follow the traditional Android life cycles, right? So you can't completely rely on resume, on pause, and these lifecycle states to handle your analytics. Jetpack Compose is declarative, so you have some side effects, something like launched effect, which help you overcome these problems. What launch effect does is it lets you handle side effects without having to repeat things or without having to worry about recomposition again and again. So something like this would help you capture your screen analytics just once, because Jetpack Compose can recompose the screen multiple times without even any user interaction. It really is out of your control. But if you do something like this, Jetpack Compose guarantees that anything with that launched effect composable block is called only once, because internally it remembers the state of it and yeah, it's been called. But if you exit the screen and come back to it, it will call it again because now the state has changed. Or even if you close the app and come back, which is fine, which is kind of what we want. If you close the screen and come back to it, it's a new screen view. Okay, that works for composable. Okay, but if you think about it, this is a bit clunky because now every time you want to track a button or every time you want to track a screen, you would have to pass the composite analytics reference down a hierarchy of composables. Let's say you've got 5 levels of declared UI, and the 5th one, actually, the innermost composable is the only one which needs to call the interface. So you have to pass the reference down all 5 of them, which is kind of a waste. And I don't like that nightmare of callbacks and all that stuff. So Jetpack Compose comes with something called composition locals. And what it allows you to do is create your own local interface or local references of something. You might have used local context and things like that. It is a composition local, which you can access within any composable. Similar to that, what we do is we kind of create a no operation analytics. You would see that the track screen and track view is doing nothing. It's unit. And then we create a static composition local of, using that API, we create the composition local for analytics. And then, yeah, and then using a code like this, you create your composition local provider. What that does is it creates the implementation reference or provides the implementation reference within that scope. So you create a composition local provider, which exposes a composable where you have your outermost composable. This goes probably on the activity level or fragment level if you're dealing with that. And your outermost composable could be a scaffold, could be your main screen, whatever your structure is, but the outermost one. And then within that, within your innermost composable, very, very deep composable, could be 10 layers deep, totally your call. Similar to local context, you could just have local analytics interface and use the current value of it and just call composition, composite analytics or whatever your implementation is. But then question is, why do we stop here? How can we integrate further with Jetpack Compose? So there are these 2 fun composables which you can use, don't have to. In my opinion, the second one is a bit useless because it's an action, it'll be user-driven, and then it'll probably be on a click or something like that where you do not have the composable scope. So you won't be able to call this function. But in case you want to track some event which is non-user driven, and I've had a use case like this, that's why I have this function, you can call it. And then track screen is just leave it at the topmost level of your screen, call it, forget it. And then if you wrap your topmost screen in a composition local provider, you will have the local analytics interface ready. All you have to do is pass the screen name in the composable, something like this, and it'll be tracked. You don't have to worry about all the abstractions and everything within the composable. Makes it easy. Now I'm going to introduce something called analytics, because we're making analytics vendor agnostic, if you think about it. So I just tried to call it analytics. Whatever we've discussed so far, minus the composite local, I've neatly wrapped it in an Android library. It's packaged and shipped as an early alpha 0.0.1. It's already on Maven Central. It goes a little beyond. So it holds context data, it holds breadcrumbs. A very common pattern I've seen in analytics where enterprises would like to, trace the user path through breadcrumbs, have a lot of context data, form of a hash map or something. So yeah, this library holds all of that and provides this interface, but does not provide the implementation, because implementation differs from one provider to another, to another, to another. That is the only part that you have to worry about, and then just call things. But at the same time, I've added two more artifacts, one which deals with Firebase, one which deals with Adobe. Why these two? Because they do not require context when you have to send your analytics. I was dealing with Mixpanel and AppsFlyer as well, and both of them, for some reason, require context in every track screen and track event call. So I'm like, yeah, I'm not dealing with it. Okay, I can show that in action now. Red Studio. Is that large enough at the back? Okay, perfect. So this is straight from the library, and this is what I've got as the interface. I've got two default methods where you just care about the action name or the screen name. But in case you want to send extra data, I've got data classes and stuff like that. So there's a nice seed class for two different types of event that could happen. It could be a view event or an action event. Yeah, so, and then I've got something called context data, where you can pass a screen name and have a mutable map of context, put as many values as you want as key value pairs, and it'll just store it for you until you're ready to ship it. The other one was breadcrumbs. For now, the breadcrumbs only care about section, subsection, subsection. I've never seen anything beyond these three levels. If you're going beyond these three levels, please add or extend this class. I don't feel like extending it further. It'll be a waste. Or you could send a pull request, that's fine. What else? I've got the Firebase analytics implementation here, and it's Hilt ready. So with that injectable constructor, Hilt automatically creates a provider for you. If you've got Hilt implemented, this is available. And it takes care of converting the map to a bundle, because Firebase needs a bundle of key value pairs. Yeah, so this takes care of it. And Firebase doesn't like spaces in screen names and action names. So it converts all spaces to underscore as well. So you can go wrong and still have the values over there. Similar to that, Adobe one is a lot easier because they like map. So it's just a straight up function call. So this is just a wrapper on Adobe that way. For the sake of the library, I've created a demo views activity. So let's bore you with that first, and then we get to the exciting compose part. I've got a base activity which has the injected Firebase analytics and then a screen name. So when I go to views activity, I've got the screen name overridden over here. When the screen is actually ready, I call the track screen method. I could call just this. It would work the exact same way, because at the end of the day, it's still creating that same object for me in the library. And then within the action, so I've got an action switch menu item over here. I'm calling track action with the event details. So this is a full-fledged event object that I created. It's got an action name, it's got some context data. I'm using the actual Firebase constants as well. So because it's a string to something map, you can use whatever Firebase or Mixpanel or your analytics provider provides out of the box. And this library will work. It's not opinionated. It is for you to, tweak and play with. Similar to that, other buttons got event, button tab, 3 more buttons over here. And I've created the exact same screen in Compose. Yes. I've got the composition local provider over here, which provides Firebase analytics. And then within the main screen, actually it's outside. Yeah, so I'm calling track action over here because that's a callback or a lambda for the menu item action. Come back here and call track action. But if I go to main screen, within the scaffold, the first thing is lazy column. Where did my track screen go? Oh, must have removed it by mistake, but I should be calling track screen here, whatever the screen name is, and that's the composable I was talking about. Oh yeah, Jetpack composables in the library, so you could use that as well. They all depend on that composition local provider, so make sure you create that. If you don't create that, the library will fail, it will crash. Coming back to demo compose activity. Yeah, oh yeah, I've got the track screen here, that's why. So again, it's composable. Main screen, got a lazy column. You can see the view over here. Pretty simple, 1 title, 3 buttons, they all do something, and they send data to Firebase. I'm gonna run this app on the emulator and get the terminal out. Give me a second. How are we doing with time? Where's that? Good, okay. Okay. So while that compiles, I'm going to set up Firebase's debugging over here so that I can see the events. Okay, so what that ADB command does is tells Firebase that I'm running in debug mode, and it'll show me all the analytics it hits in real time on Firebase. Let's go to Firebase real quick. If everything works, if the demo gods are happy, they've had their breakfast or coffee or whatever, this will work. All right, we are in the compose screen. Is this visible at the back? Is it clear enough? Okay, perfect. Which button do you want me to press first?
Tap count.
Tap count. There you go. Tap count goes to 1. Let's see if something shows up here. This screen, this Firebase screen depends a lot on your internet speed as well. I was doing this same presentation somewhere and the internet was pathetic. So this showed me events after 15 minutes and I was annoyed. Come on, don't fail on me today. You know what? I'm just going to press it a few more times just in case. I'm going to show a snack bar with a spelling mistake. I'm just gonna share, open the share action sheet, which has got nothing to share. And the same thing happens on views as well. So this is the XML thing. It's the exact same thing, obviously, but does the same actions and everything. Hopefully something is here now. Yeah. Maybe the demo boards are not up yet.
Too early in the morning for demo.
Too early, yeah. I haven't had my coffee. I suspect they have just not up yet. I'm gonna try and see if I can get some values on ADB itself. Okay. Let's see. Tab count. All right, something is being sent. SSL error. That's why. It works. I promise. Okay. Let the demo be. I'll just go back to my presentation. If anybody wants to see the demo, I'll switch to mobile data and show it outside later. Going back to this, we've sort of seen it in action. So if you want to start using this library, come on. Yeah, it's available on GitHub now. It's still very early because I published it 2 weeks ago. So it's still on 0.0.1. There will be no snapshots because Sonatype's Maven Central doesn't support snapshot. And it's too hard to get to Nexus. So it's fine. And yeah, it's open source and it still is made using my experience, but I want to capture people's experience and build a better library. So feel free to contribute, raise issues, raise PRs. It's out there. Use it, crash it, help me make it better so that analytics, at least analytics is better for all the Android developers. And that's it. That was analytics on Compose. I am open to take questions now.
I do have one question. Sorry for that.
It's okay.
Your screen name is inside the launch effect. And therefore, my question is about what happens if you navigate outside of the app and then come back?
You put the app in the background and come back?
Yeah, or
Yeah.
like you have like a navigation to an external link and then you're coming back.
Come back to the same. It gets fired again because that is a state change on the reactivity level or a fragment level. So the launch effects remember part, forgets it and launches it again.
Okay.
And that is kind of what is required because it is a navigation out of the screen and back into the screen. Yeah.
How do you handle sending pieces of data to multiple providers in your implementation with different key names? Because like pretty much everything is a key value pair that is pushed out to a provider like PayPal or whatever. Any thoughts on how we can, like some provider might not like calling a screen name, they might call something else.
Yeah. Yeah.
Have you encountered such a?
Yes. So sort of yes. Adobe doesn't call it screen name; they call it action everywhere. They don't have the concept of screens and actions. There's just track and the action. Firebase has a screen and an action kind of thing. So it all depends on your implementation of that particular abstraction interface. If Adobe doesn't want any screens, you can call the same function of the mobile core SDK and it'll send data according to Adobe's requirements. Yeah, that's the idea.
One of the things that's sort of trending with Jetpack Compose is reducing the number of activities in an application, and traditionally each, enough of them call them screen names.
Yeah.
How are you finding it where you've gone from say 100 screens to 10 or 1 or whatever, where now you're just sort of, it's sort of the navigation to part of the app
Right.
rather than going to a separate activity? How have you found able to cope with that, or?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question because just in June, July, I did massive transition from a heavily activity one fragment per activity and 5 such activities to a completely Jetpack Compose screen-based thing. And that is where I have had to work on analytics heavily, and this is inspired mostly from that. So what I found was, because each fragment was being tracked by the screen, they were being tracked as screens, and then moving each of them away to individual composable screens, they are treated as screens, and I can call track screen there. So from an analytics perspective, it's just that the backing implementation of what a screen, or backing definition of what a screen is, that has changed, but the analytics still remain the same. The context data still remain the same. There has been slight change in the design and stuff, but then that's an implementation thing. I don't have to worry about that for analytics. But yeah, going from 100 activities to maybe just 1 or 2 and dealing with maybe 50 composables, I haven't encountered that yet. But from an analytics perspective, I would assume that UI defines the analytics, or users' actions define the analytics, not the implementation of how the screen is made. Yeah.
What's planned for the future of it?
For this
Yeah,
library,
is there like any new features coming up or anything?
I kind of want to get the composite thing in, but then at the same time, I can't define a composite. Composite depends on what all you need. So that is something I'm still figuring out how to do that, or at least expose that you can build a composite with this, and then better API docs. I haven't written API docs yet, so I have to write that.
Would you say it's doable to do something with a like Pride convention plugins?
Sorry, come again?
The build convention. Do you think it's doable? It's possible to do something with it, like a
Maybe, yeah. Yeah, I haven't thought about it, but if you've got an idea in mind, I'm happy to discuss and add it as part of the library, ship 0.0.2, whatever. Yeah.
Hey, I'll just give you an example of why you would have multiple providers. I've seen this firsthand. So sensitive and private information that's logged to like a on-site
Right.
buyer.
Okay.
So often it's a shelf tool that you log to where you wouldn't want to push these things out into the cloud.
Okay. Thanks for that. I've always wondered why you would want to send it to both Adobe and Firebase, or even an on-site one. But yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it also makes sort of removing private information
Right.
automatically or this kind of thing in
Okay.
a library like this, not necessarily the best idea,
Okay.
because it could stop that kind of usage.
Yeah. Right. Thank you. Probably the last question because we're running out of time. I think. Yeah.
Nice presentation, by the way.
Thank you. No animations.
If you had like an app that has some separate data layer abstracted, like Remote, for instance, you still need to have these hooks in the UI layer. Would you just keep everything in the data layer instead?
Yeah. Interesting, because I have thought about this, and like I said, the library is not opinionated that you have to use it this way. That's why it comes with a compose part, which wraps around the base library of sorts. Like if I don't know if you noticed, but I've got inject constructors, inject annotated constructors for Firebase and Adobe as well. So you can inject it if you're using Hilt, you can inject it in your data layer. If you're using Coin, I can add support. And you can just put it in your data layer. You don't have to use the UI part. The idea was the function that you're calling to start analytics should not change over the lifetime of the app. It's the implementation which is defined by the person who's building the app or the product. Change that. Don't worry about calling track screen, track views, or whatever, things like that, because that is the maximum amount of effort that is required. Okay, I think I can still take questions. If no more questions, we wrap it up here. I'll be around the whole day if you want to discuss things further, if you've got ideas of improving this one. Oh yes, one more thing that I wanted to do, and so this is to answer your question again. I kind of want to try and make this Compose multi-platform. So that is something I want to do. I don't know when I'll do it, if I'll do it or not. But yeah, that is one of the things I want to do. Right, it's been great. You've been a lovely audience. Thank you so much.